Okay, so it's spin art, but spin art with resin. It ain't your kid's spin art. Stick around, see how I do it.
Hey everyone, Mark with DVD Creations here. I thought for my first YouTube video I would narrate it to explain how I do some things. Also with this piece right here, not everything goes according to plan, so I'll have some explaining to do there also. So I'm starting off with a piece of metal, 22 gauge, 24 inch steel disc. First thing I'm doing here is taking 400 grit to it to give myself a mechanical bond. Another reason why I'm going to be narrating is because I can't always keep my mic clipped on while I'm working. Sometimes I skip this step and go straight to my grinder. Here's where I create a lot of interesting looks. Every wheel, brush, sanding disc, whatever I take to it from this point is going to create some really neat looks. Whenever I first started doing this, I was just trying to give myself a mechanical bond. Then I realized that a lot of the scratches and imperfections underneath the resin were giving off some neat looks. Whenever they would catch the light, they would appear, disappear, kind of dance around a little bit. So that's when I started doing all of this. After I'm done grinding all my swirl marks into it, I'll thoroughly clean it with acetone, and then it's time for some resin. Little confession here, that right there was actually supposed to be green, but as you can see, it's more blue. I did something to my dye, I didn't shake it up on a previous use, and now I'm left with this sad blue, but I didn't realize it until I started to make this piece right here. So I'm just rolling with the punches. Sad blue it is. Another issue that I'm dealing with here is the resin. See, it was cold in my garage. I wanted to get my resin up to a good working temperature, so I was using the space heater to heat the garage and my resin. I kind of overshot that because I was getting lights and cameras and all that other good stuff ready. And it was too hot. And then I mixed it up. It was starting to cure faster because it was too hot. I didn't really realize that, and I went ahead and threw it in my vacuum chamber to degas it. So it was sitting in there, curing at a higher rate. It's not the end of the world. I'm just having to use my heat gun to work it a little bit more so it self-levels itself. Here we are where the action happens, my sling ring. It's a 30-inch wide steel ring, 10 inches tall, countersunk down into the table. Below the table, I got my motor, which is controlled by a foot pedal, and attaching the artwork to the motor is a 6-inch magnetic wheel. Don't worry, in the future we'll explore exactly what's underneath the table, making all of this work. I'm going to stop right there just to recap of some things that I've said. I am spinning a big decorated saw blade at over 2,000 RPM, held in place by magnets. I'd love to see more people incorporating resin into spin art, but please don't do it with things that'll cut you in two. Okay, so this piece has been centered, scuffed, and cleaned. I have a couple different methods that I use for starting this off. Sometimes I go with a totally dry method, which shows the paint from the moment that it hits the piece. Sometimes I just sling a bunch of resin around towards the center, and then like here I did a dollop of resin, and then I take it for a spin. Any paint that I put on top of it will not stick right there in that center area where the clear resin's at. A lot of times I mix my acrylic with resin. This time I was feeling a little crazy and thought I'd just pour it straight out of the bottle. So I have black that I threw down on there, and then some gold, and way too much white, and then some gray. Right off the bat, I start to notice that something is not quite right. I know my piece is centered, but it's starting to dig in on one side and starting to seem like it's getting out of balance. And I still keep trying. I'm not able to get my piece up to full speed like it needs to be. And though you might be thinking that this is one crazy looking piece not turning out the way that I want it to, and for some reason I keep piling stuff on top of it as if that's going to change something. At this point, I'm getting desperate for anything to move away from the center of this piece, but it's just not happening. With resin that's starting to cure, so it's getting too thick, and a mounting bracket that's getting worse. I mean, look at this right here. That's almost 1.5 inches out of whack. Magnet's holding on for dear life. I'm not trying to look like a magic act gone wrong, so I had to hit the stop button. So if it wasn't for me trying to make my first video with this piece right here, it probably would have wound up in the fail pile. But what's the first video without a couple bumps along the way? Which means I'm doing my favorite thing in the world, fixing my mistakes. Which consists of me getting rid of what I considered a monstrosity of resin and different paints all clumped up towards the center. One last thing that I want to take care of with this thing before I throw it in the sling ring again was to get rid of some of the crazy thick lines that occurred from me throwing down too much red Alcan white paint in the first spin. Here we are for round 2 in the sling ring. Since you last saw this piece in here, the table has been broken and fixed a couple times, so maybe we'll get through this spin without any mishaps. Don't want to do anything too crazy with this. I have just about what I want, but I really want to darken everything up. So in order to do that, I'm going to give it a smoke layer on top. To achieve that, I'm going to use some Ralcan black paint mixed in with just a little bit of resin, some clear resin, and then some acrylic pearl mixed in with resin. And then to add a little bit color within that smoke, I'm going to dust some gold. I'll keep alternating back and forth with all these colors until I achieve the look that I want. On a side note, there's nothing like seeing your little camera on screen to teach you the importance of hitting the record button. Hey, how about that? I'm finally happy with my results. So that means I can lock it in with the flood coat. But before I do that, I gotta give myself a mechanical bond with some scuffing and then good cleaning with some isopropyl alcohol. As you can see in the reflection, I'm doing a pre-flood check before I drop the resin. As with any flood coat, don't be shy with the resin and always take it to the very edge. Since I degassed my resin for my final flood coat, one quick hit with the heat gun should take care of any bubbles.
Here we are, back with our finished piece of spin art. To think on 2 separate occasions, I was really close to making this thing into a Frisbee, but I pushed through and it was well worth it. I have a piece now that I really enjoy looking at. The metal base on here, the grinds and all the swirl marks that were put in there are glowing, appearing and disappearing as they should. The blue on here, I'm glad that I covered a lot of it up. On that second one, I did a heavy smoke on here, but not too much though that it's not covering up the whole thing. You can still see through here. That's the original blue. But I didn't put too much on there that I can still see my my shadows that are being cast down onto the metal base below from all these lines. Helps add to that 3D look. I like how the gold was on the first spin, chose to take the path of least resistance and right on top of the wet paint resin that was already there. And then on the second spin, I was pretty much just throwing gold in with the black, but more black. But I wanted the gold to be dusted throughout, so it tied the whole piece into this mishap from the first spin. The flood coat, I couldn't ask for much better. It's pretty much a piece of glass. Nice and smooth, looks great at an angle, and the edge is nice and smooth all the way around. And that's it. Stay tuned, I have more spins to show. Also, I still have to show you guys how I hang these things. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit that like button and also subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell. Thanks a lot, I'll see you soon.